where we host local and visiting artists here at CPW. You are in one of our two locations as we transition. Wow. Okay. It's a long day. Transition to our permanent home at 25 Diederich. We'll still be doing artist talks here and have exhibitions through next year. So keep an eye on this place. Keep an eye on 25 Diederich, which is a block and a half away. We have a lot of different things going on. My name is Sarah Danziger. Again, you're here for Meet the Artist Night. I have a couple announcements before I get to the main show. Next week, we have an opening here. Sadly, Brenda's show will be coming down, and opening next Saturday from 5 to 7 p.m. We'll have a show curated by Stephen Blauweis, our local historian, Kingston historian, with documentary photographs by Jean Downer. So that'll be really fun. And again, that'll be over here from 5 to 7 p.m. I'm going to read a little bit about Brenda Ann Kenneally, who we've had the honor of hosting this show for the last 2 months. Brenda Ann Kenneally is a multimedia documentary maker, Guggenheim Fellow, and activist whose visceral, long-form projects have broadened the humanistic scope of the documentary form. A frequent contributor to the New York Times Magazine, Kenneally has won several major awards, including the W. Eugene Smith Award for Humanistic Photography, a Soros Criminal Justice Fellowship, the Mother Jones Documentary Photography Award, and the World Press Photo Award, a NIFA grant, the Best of Photojournalism Award by the National Press Photographers Association, and several other grants from the New York State Council of the Arts. Her 2006 book, Money, Power, Respect, Pictures of My Neighborhood, is a decade-long look at the Brooklyn neighborhood where she and her son lived. Her 2018 book, Upstate Girls, What Became of Collar City, 2004 to 2013, sold out. Published with Reagan Arts, the book powerfully captures how the paucity of social, legal, and economic opportunities straitjacket and harm the psyches of 2 generations of young people growing up in Troy, New York. Kenneally founded a little creative class in 2018 to address the social and economic obstacles that deter low-income youth from participation in the idea-based creative economy. Let's give it up for Brenda Ann Kenneally.
God, I think we should have whoever wrote that comment. Thanks. Hi. So coming to the end of a long run here at the CPW room in Kingston, starting in the back lot in the container, and then this beautiful show that I'm really honored and grateful to have had, because this work, even though I've been at it for a while and we've done a lot of things together, most of the folks in the photographs and myself, it's been shown very little in the United States, a lot in other countries. So I'm really glad that it's kind of at the end of 20 years here. So I made some notes because I'm a senior citizen and I get to do that. And I'm starting basically with, I was introduced through CPW to a person that I haven't met yet, Alan Gouverneur, who does the documentary arts website and publication. So I had a brief conversation with him on the phone, and he said, well, we have this column and I'd like you to write something for it. And it's the sort of theme is truth and documentary. So I started thinking about that and made some notes about it. And one is that my family is unfiltered with a little buffer between them and the world. And that's how I approach life. So I think that in truth, the more I'm able to reveal and share about myself, true stuff, because if I present something that's not really in my heart true, I'm going to get that reflected back as well. And so I approach life from my own experience, and I actually believe every story is about me, but only as a vessel, because the whole point of this is that we are all one. And I was quoting Marianne Williamson, but I can't actually source it back to her, but I love the phrase that none of us can get to heaven until all of us can get to heaven, whatever that is. So again, the more I'm willing to share about myself. And also, I didn't plan any of this. It started with an introduction, which I'll circle back to. And there are relationships, just like any we have, that happens, and then they take work to keep them going. And right now this is a prop, but I'm going to put it down. It will be revealed at the end. And so this is 2 books, one published, one in the works, Upstate Girls and then Grown Upstate, because it began in 2004 and it's now 2023. The photo on the back wall and the one outside on the sign was taken like this summer. So the second book, Grown Upstate, is sort of in the works. And then the third, I see them as a trilogy, is called Baby Girl Kenneally. That's me. It's on my birth certificate. Also be revealed at the end. And so there's not really a big separation between the pictures on the wall and my life. I mean, it actually is my life. If I look back, I can tell you I was there for all of this. So I'm writing this memoir, and I'm actually doing it right now with just words, no pictures. And it comes to me that the pictures that I make with words are just as important. And if you have them together, I think that they both should equally give more information and contextualize, because contextualizing is incredibly important. And so I'm about to read to you something that I just wrote. I'm at this residency and actually starting this journey. So it's kind of hot off the presses. Today's my father's birthday. That's him. And he loved Dunkin' Donuts. We bonded over that. So we don't really celebrate Christmas and stuff in our house, but we do celebrate Fast Eddie's birthday, which is October 19th. And he would have been 88 years old. He died when he was 74. And that's very old for somebody with his the mental health issues that he struggled with. And so I thought, well, I'm going to read this because I want to read. And then I realized that it is actually through the Upstate Girls Project that I started documenting my father, but also because when I was introduced to them, understood that he lived just like a couple houses over. We would go in and out of sort of seeing him or knowing where he was. And so I have this thing when I'm writing, and I guess now when I'm photographing, that it's kind of like a math problem. Like if the end comes back to meet the beginning organically, then it's the truth. Like it proves out. I don't know if that's true or not, but when something feels right or complete, that's what happens. So I'm going to read this passage, and I'm not going to tell you how long it is. Like we do now. We know how long everything is, but I will tell you that it's not going to take up the whole time. And actually, it's only 10 minutes. So it's almost impossible to say I'm going to do this. If I go for a walk with my son, he knows like how long it's going to be. I'm like, the beauty of like letting our minds grow is that we get lost. Anyway, we're going to get lost in 10 minutes and I'll bring you right back home. So what I'm writing ends with the death of my parents, my mother, and then my father. And so the last sentence is after, and I was estranged from my mother, but was not from my father. And so the last sentence starts with finishing up after she has passed away and we're all there. We were not a sentimental clan, and by then had all lived very separate and different lives, but we had learned to come together for death and do right by our own no matter what. We gained some experience with figuring out what right looked like 12 years earlier when Betty, our mother, was preceded in death by her ex-husband and our father, Fast Eddie. In the days leading up to Fast Eddie's death, we 3 Kenneally kids and our kids, Betty and Fast Eddie's sister, all gathered on Heroes Way, the name the Albany VA hospital had given to their hospice unit. Fast Eddie's sister, to whom he had been a doting and protective older brother in their youth, assured him when she left the hospital hours before he passed that she would meet him in heaven. When one of us asked if we were sure he was going to heaven, she conferred with a response in the conviction of a pope, Irish pope. You bet your ass he's going. I believed her, even when we held his hand in disbelief that Fast Eddie, who we had seen beat death in the 11th hour more times than we could remember, might not actually be indestructible. Decades of depression and mania, suicide attempts, chain smoking, DUIs, MIAs, overdoses, and comas gave a surreal quality to this moment that we had been perpetually prepared for. I was the person who saw Fast Eddie's last breath and the last to hold his hand. I was as close to my father as I was estranged from my mother, and Eddie was as unfiltered and forthcoming about the details of his past as Betty was silent and evasive. Fast Eddie had been a willing collaborator in the photographs and videotapes I had made of his daily routines that unfolded over the last 7 years of his life. I had all the access to his memories, mental records, and the landscape of his physical existence that I needed to fill in the gaps left by his passing, both as a daughter and a practitioner of the long-form documentary journalism I had built a life around. Through Fast Eddie, I came to associate truth with love. Fast Eddie was the first in our Roman Catholic family to be cremated with little worry of hellfire, because he had been reassured that even the Catholic Church was now sympathetic to the prohibitive cost of traditional burial, especially for low-income families like ours. Fast Eddie's bipolar disorder entitled him to $600 a month disability benefits, plus small cost of living increases each year, which he had lived on since the 1970s, when this kind of mental illness was first becoming medically recognized as a disability. When Fast Eddie died in 2009, his income made us eligible to apply to social services for $2,000 to cover the cost of his cremation. An evening of viewing at the funeral home and casket rental for calling hours was covered by the Veterans Administration, where Fast Eddie was still entitled to all the rights and privileges due a young soldier who was discharged at the convenience of the U.S. government after going AWOL on a drinking bender when stationed at the Brooklyn Navy Yard with the U.S. Coast Guard. We chose a funeral home that was owned by a family we 3 kids had gone to grade school with. Daniel Keenan was the trusted undertaker of choice for our Irish Catholic family when saying goodbye to our loved ones. Granny's husband, that's my mother's father, and Grandpa Ray, her husband, and her mother and father, my great-grandparents, Liz and Julius, had all been laid out there, and the young daughter, Keenan, who we all knew since she was a child, was grown now and taken over for her father, who had retired. My sister and I were able to pitch in at the funeral home, saving a few dollars by doing Fast Eddie's hair and makeup and dressing him ourselves in preparation for the service. An acceptable sport coat and tie were loaned to us by a family friend from the neighborhood, and we outfitted Fast Eddie accordingly from the waist up to accommodate the top half of the open casket. Fast Eddie's grade school friend, Father O'Connor, who had given Fast Eddie the last rites on several occasions that had turned out to be false alarms, finally delivered Fast Eddie's eulogy. Though Fast Eddie was such a survivor, some of us half expected he would remain true to his MO to the last and walk in the door mid-sermon like nothing ever happened. We brought things that honored the life of a guy who made his living by driving. A one-time Teamster who slid to the bottom of the job call list when he stole his boss's Cadillac to drive to California with a pretty woman. A hack for Pine Hills and yellow taxis who made pit stops at OTB in between fares. Fast Eddie delivered pizzas and dentures and made coffee and sandwich run for the boys at the card room in the number spot, who always let him keep the change. He regularly drove his friend Pizza Mike to the casino that earned him a steak and a night out. And then there was that stretch of driving his buddy Joe Oink around the state fair circuit to sell knockoff Louis Vuitton bags that almost got Eddie and Joe indicted by the feds. Fast Eddie used to say, "I couldn't dig a ditch for you, but I'd drive you anywhere." Over the years and on the road, coffee and cigarettes were his mainstay and constant companions, and we sent him off with a pack of Misty 100s menthols tucked in the left breast of his borrowed suit coat, and at his sides placed 2 extra-large cups from his favorite coffee haunts, which alternated between the Stewart Shops and Dunkin' Donuts, depending on which chain had the counter girl who most enthusiastically reciprocated his flirtations at the time. Each of the grandkids wrote notes to him, and one by one went up to the casket and anchored them in the satin lining that cradled Grandpa's heads. One of the greatest shames of Fast Eddie's life was his military record. A peacetime soldier who, by his own account, never saw any combat, deserted his post, and was all thumbs when it came to tying up his sea bag. Years later, of the countless times he was admitted to the VA psych ward for bouts of psychosis and electroshock therapy, he would say how guilty he felt sitting among his fellow vets in the day room, watching World War II movies and listening to them recount the action they saw. When after a stateside stint, that's a tough one, in the Coast Guard, he was getting a check for just being bugged out. On the occasion of his death, Fast Eddie was finally absolved when following orders from the VA, a soldier in a dress uniform showed up at Fast Eddie's funeral and lifted his horn to blow a mournful refrain of taps. When the bugle call signaling lights out at the end of a military day had settled over Fast Eddie's body, the solemn soldier placed a folded American flag on my mother's lap as she sat next to his casket in her wheelchair. Though they had been divorced for over 40 years, Fast Eddie's strict Catholic background prohibited him from remarrying, even though he had had a string of live-in girlfriends under his belt, so to speak. Up until the last, Fast Eddie never broke his habit of stopping in at Betty's to bring her coffee in the early mornings, and my sister would tell how she often saw them surrounded by the pre-dawn darkness, staring straight ahead in silence, cups in hand. Sorry, I've only read it a couple times. So now let's get to what would Fast Eddie would say, get to the main course or something. So my father lived in Troy, and I had left upstate New York when I was very young. I was involved a lot in the court system, and I hitchhiked to Miami, and basically never went back to upstate New York till after I lived in Miami for 20 years, and then quite some time in Bushwick, Brooklyn. So I'm kind of trying to figure how I can show you something that really isn't on the wall. But anyway, what started this kind of project, and I'll just go through it and then stop, was this assignment from the New York Times about a father of one of the young girls who my friend Adrienne LeBlanc had written another really long 10-year plus piece of written journalism. And so after I was already back in New York, they called me to photograph the father of the girl who lived on one of these blocks, or where I would wind up spending a lot of time. And so that's how I came to understand that my father lived very close. So I did that, and I'm just going to keep going. I did that, and I became very interested in the friends of the family of this young girl, particularly one named Kayla, who's kind of one of the two there's two families of two main girls now who have their own families. And she was the other girls in the random family book. They were Spanish. They were from the Bronx, but this was a white girl. This was a white girl with blonde hair. She was 14. She was pregnant. I had been pregnant at 14, and trying to get forward to where she is. Okay. So this is the story that started it all. So I had been pregnant at 14. Anyway, I really looked at Kayla. That's her there. That was like a month after we met. And when I went into her house, it looked exactly like the house that I had lived with my mother, Betty. And so after I finished the Times assignment, she was very shy, kind of was going back to visit her. And then I was asked after a while, because she wasn't visibly pregnant when I met her, that would I like to photograph their birth? And I did. And so that's the girl who was took the role of the baby daddy, and also the daughter of this man who was in the New York Times assignment. And they were a romantic couple, both 14. They're both grown-up gay women now, but I just used to say romantic couple because I didn't know, how committed they were. But they were in love, and both of them the baby's father was in prison while the baby was born, and her father there was in prison from the time he was 16. He didn't get out until he was, well into his 30s. So there was a lot of issues that were involved. At this time, the United States had reached, over 1 million people that we incarcerate in the prison industrial complex, and the effort to reform the Rockefeller drug laws, which is how this young man became ensnared, and some other things too, but that was at the core of it. And so I stayed, and I just couldn't put it into one, like it wasn't about teen mothers. It wasn't about the Rockefeller drug laws. It wasn't about, working class poverty. It was about America. And so we started doing a lot of things. We did these scrapbooks. I'm just talking about the roots and branches the project has had as it sort of organically grew. About, I would say, the third year in, we did this arts workshop at a place that was across the street, and we had this idea. Actually, one of the girls had the idea to do scrapbooks. And when they started bringing things that were important to them, it was not the Martha Stewart thing that I might have imagined. It was, Polaroid pictures and her father's. I don't even know actually how you could get that today. It would be almost, I've tried to get mine and you can't get it. And so things that really were important in the landscape of their lives without looking at it from the inside in out, not as one might as a viewer, because I've had a lot of questions, are they ashamed of this? Do they feel exposed? I mean, the truth, for better or worse, is this is their childhood. And so I think that any question like that, or even thinking about that, sort of really underscores the separation that we have. So in America today, and especially in New York State, was leading the way at the disparity between, rich and poor, education, not education, however, whatever line you want to put it in, we got, both ends of the spectrum. So I also began, as we were showing the work and I was getting these questions, to go on this mission of demystifying shame, that somehow these lives, and in fact my life, was outside of something American, that folks had done something wrong, they weren't plugging in, or they missed something. And I'm a believer, and more people are writing about it. Matthew Desmond is huge, hugely funded from Harvard too, I always like to add, writing about how class and poor folks and vulnerable folks are expected and necessary. And that's what capitalism is. So I went on this kind of search of going to the Historical Society and going right back to finding ways to situate these lives. That's the birth. I realize people want to see something and not just hear me. So getting to the prison, people were talking a lot at that time. That was probably 2008, about prison towns, especially in post-industrial communities where the industry had gone. This happens to be the site here of what was once the Burden Iron Works. They had the patent to, Bessemer steel, how to process steel. And they actually made all the horseshoes for the Civil War. And what I've read, and I wrote it in the book, it factored in the victory for the North, because we had all the horseshoes and they didn't. So that, and of course the collars. But this, I hate to take these kind of hokey pictures, but that was part of the Burden Iron Works. And this is in fact the Rensselaer County Jail. And there's not a person in here. Even my son's own father, in doing this book, I was collecting all these envelopes, and they have SpongeBob and these beautiful pieces of artwork. So I'm going through all this. I have a storage unit and a half of my stuff and their stuff, plus the digital stuff. boxes of my father's psychiatric record, like you name it. I'm a digital hoarder and now just a hoarder. And so I'm like, oh, this is a good piece of artwork. And I turned it over and it's from my son's father to him. And it's like, oh, Rensselaer County Jail. I didn't even plan that. And I didn't even remember it, but I just stashed it because it was a good piece of artwork. Anyway, the thing about the whole not in my backyard prison town, prison industrial complex, that happens to be a county jail that has its own set of economic roots and branches, is that when industry dies, towns are more apt to want these not in my backyard kind of businesses that they wouldn't want if they had other thriving industry there. Like no one wants a prison or a homeless shelter, or they still don't want homeless shelters. But prisons, they employ people. You know, upstate New York, I just came from Clinton a couple weeks ago, and that's the whole town. The big wall, the Dunkin' Donuts, and the guards there. There's a set of postcards that was propaganda showing like the beauty of New York State. That's the anniversary of the half moon. Those are the horseshoes. I mean, I'm not going to go through every one. They're on the wall. The collars, huge textile industry that started very humbly, kind of the ingenuity of a woman who didn't want to wash her husband's full suits in this dirty industrial town. And so she cut the collar off, you know, according to what I've read, and the local historians vet it, even though they weren't there either. That it, you know, caught on like wildfire, and it became like an industry that had, like, I guess they call it 7,000 operatives. The interesting thing about that is, and looking at the railroad. So when I'm looking at all this, and this was 2006 or 7, that's like downtown. And then I went back because now downtown Troy is gentrified, but that's like the local pawn shop in downtown. So I'm looking at all this transportation. That's the opening of a Ford plant in Green Island. I'm looking at all this transportation and also realizing the role that transportation, like as much progress as we make, it also leaves people behind. And I'm of a mind that it leaves you behind if you're vulnerable and you're just standing still. Like you're just standing still. Everything else is moving forward, and you're there because somebody has to hold down the dirty work, right? And I don't even know about, I can't even get into the AI. It just came into my mind, but I'm not going to. So urban renewal, once the Collar City Bridge was put in, just like the same story in America, things went away from the downtown. So you got the pawn shop and the baby daddy in jail, and then everybody's at the mall. And so that's the urban renewal in Troy. You can trace like so much to those programs. And also even then, so the textile industry, and I had all these pictures of trains, like we know that when that headed down south, that also changed what was happening here. I'm just going to try to go very fast. So then I started doing things like being hyper local on the block, and you can't read them, but, and let's see, 1915, these directories, which the Rensselaer County Historical Society, they did this book with me. The women there were amazing. And when I first went, I was trying to like radicalize them. I was like, do these little interviews, and I'd say, would you say that the service industry today is like akin to the collar laundresses? And so they'd go right to the facts. And that was like very frustrating to me. But as time went on, they would give these talks, and they were my partners, and they then put the scrapbooks that the people did, and will still, if I keep turning them out, because they have to be digitized, and it's laborious and expensive, quite frankly. But they then renewed their mission in practice to weave the stories of everyday people into the history that was there. Because when I went in to get all of the contextualizing historical photos and scrapbooks, there was no representations and no scrapbooks done by any of the 7,000 collar laundresses or any of those people. So anyway, this was the directory that also cross-referenced where people lived and what they did. And it's impossible to read, but this is the block where my family is. And my father lived like a couple streets over and on the other side. historically, this neighborhood of North Troy, which they call it now North Central, because it's like the hood of Troy, right? Housed working class people and widows. After a while, I'd see this little W, and the woman at the Historical Society, that means that widows live there. So it was so interesting, like single moms, widows then. And of course, this is not, except for that house where we did this hyperlocal museum, this is not the Tony Brownstone housing stock of downtown, which, as I also read, there was a concerted effort to make folks, when they came into the town, see the good stuff, right? So from the get-go, and then up here, so this is also not just where the collar factories were, there were also the laundries, which is, there was even a hierarchy of the collar laundresses. I don't want to get too into the minutia because I could go there. I'm like, my mind is like a pull down menu by this point. And right. So the collar laundresses were the lowest. And there's a wonderful woman named Carol Tubin who helped me. Like, I interviewed her. She wrote one of those little history books that you see. I think Don, I can't remember his name. There's history books about all kinds of places in upstate New York that are done with, existing things from the Historical Society, but she unpacks the whole hierarchy. Anyway, I could fit that right back in hand in glove where, okay, so even if people do manage to own their homes, they're threadbare homes, they're, owned by widows, single mothers in disrepair that never really gain value. Like that house next door, the Stone House, was bought by an arts organization that opened up about 4 years after we were there, right across the street. But the rest of Troy has not experienced the boom that downtown had. So all these collar, that standard manufacturing at the end of the book was sold to make these lofts. That's happening to a lot of things. And this is Kayla, one of the original mother of the two 14-year-old parents. That's her mother and her mother. So that'd be Kayla's mother in the first communion, and then her grandmother. And they all worked at that place, Standard Manufacturing, which is now, these apartments. And more of this. I want to try. This is interesting also. We were talking about this from a period called the maternalist movement. There's I don't know if she was a senator or a congresswoman, Patsy Mink, and I think she was from the Philippines. She had a lot to say about this. Basically, it was during, I think it was I'm blanking on the 40s, maybe. Josephine Baker, not the chanteuse Josephine Baker, was looking at infant mortality rate, which was really high. And so they determined that it was, it could be attributed to the younger, not the older daughters, kids, but mostly daughters, taking care of the infants while their mothers were working in these factories. And even the older kids were. And so they needed to be trained. So they used this kind of opportunity. And this is a propaganda photo, which I love. They used this opportunity to kind of like, they called it Americanizing a lot of the moms, which were immigrants. So not only would they show the young ones how to take care of their infant siblings, they would talk to them about eating American. Like, I have books, and it's really scathing about that. And so it was a way, because they also, and this has been true of our social welfare policies even today, if you read what's written, it's assumed that because mothers work, they don't care about their kids. Like, it's actually written in these books. And so the programs are targeted with the kids. Of course, that's great. But the moms, if they get any sort of assistance or support, it's incidental. And I think that's changing, but that's not only the subtext, it's kind of right out there. And so the reason that this was done, again, a great program, but there are no free lunches, was because it makes a better polity. If you can get kids and Americanize them, and you'll make them better citizens and they're going to vote. And I get it. So there's one of the nurses that are taking care of the baby coming to visit this mom. I mean, that could have been my house. Anyway, I'm not saying it's bad, but everything has kind of, if you look, there's some more history. And of course, we're seeing that today. And so this was Tony growing up, you know, as a kid among kids. I always say, like, it was hard to tell, like, who was the parents and who was the brothers and sisters. And so what happened is that the parents, because they were so young, they felt really bad. And they were young and also deprived and struggling, and didn't want to, like, discipline their, like, just felt bad about making life any harder for their kids. So it was only until they got older and, like, Kayla saw, like, maybe I should have been a little stricter, but I really, you know, I get that. So this is just like the whole dynamic of mothers and sons, particularly in the incarceration, where the sons are infantilized, really, and disempowered through incarceration, and then come to both depend on and resent their moms, and then by extension their female counterparts in a larger world. Not always. I mean, I'm not the first person to say that. We talk a lot about race in the classroom and who's standing there and who's, you know, sort of always in control. So yeah, some of the scrapbook's going to try to go faster. This is real interesting though, so I will slow down. So in that, putting this and weaving the history and contextualizing, and this is, you know, even though I didn't go find the one person and trace their lineage, I can't even do that to my family only up until a point. This is the Troy, what they used to call orphan asylum. And these are what they used to call the inmates, whose population really grew during the potato famine and the I can't even remember what war was going on. It was before World War I, I think. I should know. Sorry. Everything's sort of in there. But during the time of the Irish potato famine. Anyway, it grew. And that is now, so that's the population of these kids, right? Like, there's not any of the, who did we have? None of the Burdens, none of the Van Rensselaers, who were the Dutch patroons, who wound up settling it way back from the time of colonization with the Native Americans. These are poor kids whose family either can't take care of them or have died. And so this place now is Vander Heyden Hall, which is used for a court-mandated juvenile. They don't call it juvenile detention anymore, juvenile placement, but that's what it is. So it's like you can almost take the heads of my kids who have either all been there or in another one, and it's the same population, even the same buildings. Sabrina, the baby daddy figure, was having a lot of, you know, dealing with a lot of trauma, and has since started medication. They were starting to have fights and acting out. They eventually broke up, and, you know, she's a grown woman now. So we all know what trauma is, and we all know that children of incarcerated parents, all the statistics about them to either repeat incarceration or any of the sort of ecosystem around it. So that was an intense moment. And then Kayla with her son, and that's her little brother and her mom. And so they're all very, like, not all, but kind of close in age. So it's like the hierarchical sort of structure isn't necessarily clear. I mean, it's a lot clearer now that the kids are older. So just kind of, this was the Troy Day Home, which was opened for like daycare for kids whose mothers worked in the factories, basically. And a lot of the language I take and quote from the book, but they say things like, this is where kids will come to be skilled in the habits of industry, and also the more scrapbooks, incarceration among the girls. This young man basically institutionalized and interacting with the law, single mother who was vulnerable and didn't feel actually comfortable, was fearful of the social safety nets in place that she would be able to reach out to. And this happens a lot. My son's a social worker, and it's one of the things we talk about, and he talked about in his classes at Hunter, is that, like, I guess it's CPS or ACS, different, the social workers, right, that are going to support you are also the interface with the court system that's going to take your kids away. So a lot of people, if they have problems with one kid where they really need support, if they have 3 others at home, they're terrified that they're going to come and take all their kids away. And so they don't. And this is a person who was amazing and is now doing life in prison. And I believe 25 to life. He may not do the whole time, but I believe that if things would have been different at that level or a different time, that wouldn't be the case today. Letters. I mean, I've known him since this is from when he was a real little kid in these institutions, and, you know, can barely spell. That's his mom, who I feel, you know, I'm a mother. So when one person in a family is incarcerated, you know, we all are. More incarceration. I'm sorry, I'm just going through it so I can get to like the next theme. You know, kind of, this is Grizzled. I was also very interested in the name. This is Grizzled Heights, which is a housing project. And then that was the Griswold Mansion, also involved in this Bessemer Steel. And that's also tied, like Griswold Heights had the paupers' graves. Like, there's stories in the Times Union from even as early as recent as 15 years ago, where a kid would be playing and sort of digging up a bone or something. So in these kind of less incorporated areas, Griswold Heights is very far. So when that woman, Billie Jean, would have to take the bus to work at McDonald's, it was, you know, a real journey, because the housing projects were not really close to the not even robust public transportation system. Okay, that's Tony. That's Deb and her mom. Her mom has since passed. I'm just going to try to go down a little bit. More scrapbooks. Oh, another interesting thing is I have the same birthday as 3 other people, which is Monday, October 23rd. So this year I'll be taking my birthday back. And so I tried to, so this picture, okay, I'm going to try to wrap it up in around 15 minutes. This picture came out in Slate, and we were talking about it with a group this afternoon. And it was it was 2014. I mean, the internet then, to me, was like light years away from what it is now. So they did this article, and I told them, you know, exactly what I wanted. And I had mixed feelings about using the word poor. And I keep wrestling with this a lot. Anyway, I said I don't use the P word, and the guy sends it to me like a month after he writes it, and there it is plastered, and this is the top image, top of the digital fold. And so immediately, folks could link to that's Kayla and that's Tony, her Facebook page, and started saying horrible things about her because of the cigarette. So I was already in this contextualized kind of thing, but I looked and I read and I studied and I wrote a pretty decent essay, which is in the book. I mean, I did this in 2017, 2018, so I can't quote myself anymore, but basically about, and I think it was Sigmund Freud's cousin, who was one of the first PR, I'm looking for his name, I can't find it. Anyway, it was Sigmund Freud, somehow involved with Sigmund Freud, and I think it was his cousin. And there's a really good movie on YouTube, a documentary about this. Made a concerted effort to get the female population to smoke by all of this. And by then it was associated with like wealthy women going to France and lighting up. And so I was like, okay, this is one of the few pleasures you have. Alcohol or tobacco is addictive. I smoked and it was harder to quit than a lot of things. And so like, what do we expect? And there's been a lot written about what cigarettes mean, you know, to working class folks. And sometimes I think it's just like carving out that minute where everybody wants you. Like this woman's a bus driver. And it's like, no, this 2.5 minutes, whatever time it takes me to do this is mine. And this is the symbol of it. So, you know, and we learn, and what trickles down is folks who don't have a lot of other distractions or what I call safe spaces. You know, 36 years ago, I started AA, and I can say that because none of this would exist, but we talked about safe spaces and getting to one safe space to the next. And for me in the beginning, a cigarette and a candy bar and a cup of coffee was a big safe space. So I get it. That's a lighter. Billie Jean used to have a lot of drama with her mom, who was taking care of another family's kids, and she felt abandoned her and all that. And I'm not like making light. I just want to try to get to the next thing. So I'm going to go sort of all the way to the end. And so all these folks basically lived in 3 houses up and down that street, and largely 2 houses, but through necessity would make a home in the basement. So many families there. It's a whole character in one of these panels, the basement. So many families would have been on the street if it wasn't for the stockless basement. And, you know, we did a talk after the book came out at Habitat for Humanities. And I thought, what am I going to say? Because, you know, this isn't really a housing issue. But then I looked and I sort of presented the case for, what if Habitat for Humanity supported 1 or 2 neighborhood, just neighbors, like everybody has that person who you know is the person you could go to. And Deb Stockless is that person. She's housed so many people in her already threadbare house. Like, what if we got a team there and made her house and her like garage a really good resource for what she's doing anyway, you know? And never happened, but I thought it was a great idea. The convent school. I mean, this picture, just whatever. Look at it and interpret it as you will. But they're giving the girls the medical. This was called the Sisters of the Magdalene. And Magdalene, as you know, I don't know if you do know, Mary Magdalene. She was the fallen woman, and you would go to this place, and they would sort of catch you before you fell. But what they had was these laundries and the sewing stuff here. And so it's called Mount Magdalene School of Industry and Reformatory Good Shepherds, to maintain charitable industrial school for the inmates. Again, they call them the inmates, so they may be useful in trades and occupations. And all this, I mean, I really see as this kind of tract life of opportunities that we still have, only it's a little more insidious, because on the face of it, we have so much and so many opportunities and so many things. But are they things that are really going to change the quality of our lives and improve them in a substantial way for ourselves and for the next generation? I think not. You know, the book I'm writing is looking at my own mother and seeing what it takes, especially for a woman and a single woman. But anyway, these laundries then, if you ever saw the movie Philomena with Judi Dench and how they took the baby away, and then the laundries that these women would work at were actually making the nuns and the Catholic Church a lot of money. So that in Ireland, they made a settlement. You know, I didn't know all this stuff. I sort of knew. And then not years later, I'm writing about it in my book. My mom went to one of these schools, and so did her sister. And her sister actually did have a baby that my grandmother had told me about, and I kind of remembered. So when my cousin called me, like during the pandemic, which that would have been her mother, and she says, a woman called me and I said, let me guess. She says she's your sister. And I said, yep. And it was, so it wasn't some faraway stuff. And then Emma Willard, where if you read then the contrast between this kind of good girl schooled in the habits of industry and be practical. Here in Emma Willard, what do they say? They just say that the offerings, one of the things I remember, the offerings of what a girl could do in her day are almost heady, like the complete stimulation. And, it's great. I want to go to one of them schools myself, but you see, and then one of our girls actually did. There's a whole thing that I may never get to until the second book, and you can call me up or buy it and we'll talk about it. But I did trace Phoebe Warren and her sort of diaries and put them in contrast to what my kids had. This is her. She was an equestrian. She went to Paris. And then this is one of my girls who gave up this baby for adoption. This is the child who was the first child of that young man that I said is in prison. And it says, basically, she writes in the scrapbook that she knew she was too poor to take care of her daughter. So she entered into an open adoption with someone in her church. And then through the next book, I've been able to see that mom growing and that young woman, 17, and now all the family is together. And there's a lot of, like, financially, no one's bought a big house or gone to Harvard or even anything in between, but the love and the healing. And I know that sounds corny, and it certainly wasn't the case in my family. I've really seen these women garner a wealth of that when they could have gone the other way and fragmented and really resented. And they didn't. They knew that they had to make a family for their kids. And now these kids really all see each other and in love. So I just want to kind of get to the end, because if I go through every person, which I do in this one, though, I do have to stop. Sorry. This one I got to stop because this is near and dear to my own heart. So Deborah Power's husband invented oilcloth. Is anyone here old enough to know what oilcloth is? Thank you. Deborah Power's husband invented oilcloth, and Deborah got his money. She lives in Lansingburg, and she opened the Deborah Powers Home for Old Ladies. And when you go back and you look at this, do I have one, like the letters that they wrote? It is this could be me. How are you going to get the money and you'll pay for yourself? But they write these letters abdicating for themselves that they're not lame and that they're healthy and that they're of good disposition. And they have to, and there's a big waiting list to get in the Home for Old Ladies. Letter, the entrance fee is $500, which includes a burial fund of $100. At present, there are no vacancies. You can be put on the waiting list. This woman says that she's very agreeable and she has many friends that love and know her, and they can say that she's certainly not the old woman I've become. I wouldn't be getting in the Deborah Powers old folks home. I don't think. Well, who knows? I might. And more artwork. That's the young man's hair. I did all these video stills. That's just like a pellet gun, a lot of boredom. James. There's the basement. Tony's 3rd birthday. Kayla's 18th birthday. Kayla's 18th birthday. She moved from her mom's downstairs, upstairs. And Kayla's a good person. She's an amazing person. Also, I'd like to point out that there's one person who was an alcoholic here that died. No one is a street drug addict. One woman died of a fentanyl overdose because she couldn't actually get to, she was using drugs, but not street drugs. She couldn't get all the way up north to get her pain prescription filled. So she copped street drugs in downtown Troy, one of the very rare times, and died of a fentanyl overdose. And then there's 3 other people, I think, that do use prescription drugs. But one, as I was pointing out, started in the group home when they were put on antidepressants, and now they're an addicted adult. A lot of abscessed teeth and stomach problems from soda, a lot of soda. And I would go to the doctor with these. I love that James dressed up like a convict, and he's actually been locked up so many times. A fantastic artist. This, and so anyway, any of the kind of like, it's not like drug use that even makes you a street drug addict, but there's like a little more taking the edge off than I noticed in younger years. Really started from some medical situation, but the stacks of like Walmart pharmaceuticals, and then if you look at what's happening with the opioid crisis, or even that secular documentary that Michael Keaton's in, it really, like, I'm seeing that play out. And so, is that me? Oh, so I'm going to do this and I'm going to go to the end. So this is the young man who's now in prison, but was out. And this, like, when you're in prison, you only get stuff according to what your family can give you. So if your family's poor on the outside, they don't get more money when you go to prison. So you're not going to get better stuff. You know what I mean? And everybody needs things, especially the food in the commissary, because the food that you get is terrible. He happens to work in the kitchen, which now gives him a little better access to food. But so he would talk about not having money for commissary because his mom is poor, working class, works in actually one of these big places that does commercial laundries, like almost like back in the day. So he talks about not having money for commissary and eating salt because it gave him like a kind of rush. So this is something that he used to make in jail, and it's called chalupas. It's regional. Jail people are locked up in other parts of the country. They call it different stuff, jailhouse spread. But so this is all stuff that you can buy in the jail commissary, like the chips and I can't remember what he puts on it, but garlic salt, just stuff that would really it gives me high blood pressure watching it. But so when he came home, and then you use the little packet to make it a mixing thing, because you're doing this in your toilet in jail. So when he came home, he would just like make this in the living room. And I just thought it was amazing how, folks that are, I don't know about amazing, but I couldn't not think about how those experiences are shaping our kids' lives in indelible ways, in what they expect. And okay, here's Tony. The blue stuff, that's a whole other, the Hannaford buttercream cake. Maybe you're familiar. I know I am. So I'm just going to keep going, helping mom work at the Hess, which there are no more Hess. Like over the past 20 years, even things like the landscape of this has changed because it's changing. And then, so the young woman who entered into the open adoption with the first baby, then got pregnant again. And so through the church, it was like she could not make that mistake twice. So she wound up getting married and then actually going back to the guy. But that's that wedding, the other baby. And the church is very, very supportive. I have a lot of loaded feelings about the church, but it can be very helpful. And so, okay, so I think this is the way I'm going to wrap it up. So Tony, the young man who was the belly in the first picture, who's now 19, he'll be 20 in April, started showing all these signs of like overreacting, being very like emotional. So Kayla used to say, oh, he has OCD, and she'd kind of like laugh at it. But over time, it became, and then she went through this whole, I'm going to skip these other families. Sorry, other families. One of her girlfriends, Chantel, she got a new girlfriend. That's her girlfriend still now. That's the young woman whose mother died of the fentanyl overdose. It was really sad. And all these people are like smart, artistic, funny, like so just can say things and sum up a situation, because when you are a survivor, particularly the ones that have been in these group homes, you read the room. Like you have to read the room. Like, what are they? I can't remember what, oh God, I can't remember what you said, but you read the room. And so that kind of intelligence is like, if we could put that together with like some book stuff, I mean, America's afraid of that. Certain people that really need this class of people to power and make them wealthy. Like if we could get the lived experience and the academic experience together, which would be my lifelong dream, we would have a different country. We'd have a whole different world. But anyway, this is also in front of that jail. That's the jail where his father was when he was born, by the way. That's Tony. And that's the ladle car from the molten stuff that they have. And they made like a little museum. I wanted to show you Tony as he starts his journey through this diagnosis of having ADHD. And he was diagnosed with PTSD and OCD, which is one, did anybody ever hear of that one? Oppositional defiant disorder. And I was like, oh, we just used to call that being a kid. But now you get a prescription for it. Most everyone here who started on meds, it was facilitated by the school because they just didn't know what to do when the kids would go there and they would, what the school calls act out. They couldn't control them. And we know now that trauma and being in these situations takes a lot of one-on-one and corralling, but also they're just scared. They're scared because they haven't had a lot of interface with particularly Tony. He's got a huge family. I mean, that's a whole community right there. Anyway, and so the school starts freaking out. And immediately, Tony, when he went to school in kindergarten, I'm not sure if it was earlier than October, but I know for sure in October, he was suspended in kindergarten. And that's, what we know, cradle to prison pipeline, and the stats are if you're suspended from school, you're far more likely, because of course, the world is like, you're so bad that you're kicked out. I mean, this is when you need it most. And this is the thing, like we give the least to the people that need it most. We like push the people away that need the most like love. It just, anyway, it just gets me. Yeah, just gets me. Anyway, that's his first prescription. And then he's like celebrating his birthdays when he first starts getting his medication. And that happened in the summer when he was 6. And he would take like a lot of things and they do these med reviews. And I remember this one Focalin. I don't know if I have it. Anyway, this kid is the most gentle, brilliant, amazing person who just thrives. I mean, that's him in the end, in the desert, like summer before last, who just thrives when you take him out. But you have to almost have been there since that first day to be that person where he's going to trust to go with you. And also, like, his mom is also kind of, the diagnosis is social phobia. They're just shy. I mean, people who haven't had a lot or had to be in front of folks, like my mother was. She was housewife until she got divorced. Like she didn't have to come here and do this. And so this is one of the teachers talking about, sorry about that. No, but you know what I mean? Like why we have to like be on all the time now. That's another thing. Also the home of Uncle Sam, just so you know, Troy's the home of Uncle Sam. In the JFK years, I'm trying to get to the end here. So this is Tony by the time he's just getting really at the height of his like really needing the meds. He starts to get like hyperactive, stops eating, plays the game. He's also being raised by kids who, particularly Kayla's girlfriend, grew up in the juvenile justice system and group homes. So they want to let him play the game. They don't want to be hard on him, because they've been locked up themselves. So they don't want to see that happen to another kid on their watch. So he's prescribed these clonidine and all these things. And this is his 7th birthday where he goes to this place, Four Winds. Kayla now is at her wit's end because she's in charge of this whole med regiment. And so he comes home on his 7th birthday, and we tell him like that his birthday was a couple days, like birthday was a couple days before that, but we told him that was his birthday. But in the process, when he's making his phone calls, they say, from the crisis unit, well, you're going to be home in 24 hours in a wake up, or a day in a wake up. And in prison, that means you're going to go to sleep, and when you wake up, you're getting out. And so that's like the language, I'm going to do that in a wake up. And so all of that kind of like institutionalization is just growing up as a child. He was homeschooled for a long time. Those poor teachers. I'm looking at it now because he's grown, and it's so like he looks at this and it's like, who is that kid? This was incredible. Like he's literally, I don't know if that one made it in there. He does all that. And then I have this series where he does that, and then she's talking and he literally lays on the floor with the pencil like this, like he's killed himself. It was kind of ingenious, but and so also some of these women, I can't find that one, were the homeschooled his mom and her brother. So it's like a whole cyclical thing. And Tony, and then so when you're homeschooled, you just kind of learn to be on your own. And he would always look for the kids to come home. And then he went into this place, St. Coleman's Home, where her mother, who was in one of the pictures, was in St. Coleman's Home because she wasn't an orphan. St. Coleman's is orphan home. I remember it from when I was a kid. Also, all these kind of things where kids were abused and maybe even had died there. And there's Facebook groups about the survivors. There they are. I remember that from when I was a kid. This is like one of the stitches that he got from St. Coleman's, because when you go in a place like that, or any kind of alternative, particularly grade schools, Kayla's mother signed, that it's okay to restrain him. So that was a restraint where he got a few staples in his head that kind of went wrong. But then the teacher writes back, Tony was a little off today. He refused to stay in because he wanted to go outside the classroom. He started running, became unsafe. We put him in a restraint. After that, he turned it around and finished his day on a positive note. Okay. Lots of stuff about love and food and sugar, salt, and fat, and the addictive qualities of that, all tied to, maybe needing meds for ADHD. And, the fast food industry also goes, no pun intended, hand in hand with like internet and porn addiction. Porn addiction is real. I mean, Chris Hedges, he's a serious journalist. He talks about it in like, he relates it to like Nietzsche's theory of suicide and the end times in a society, but the rise of I can't remember the name of his book he did in 2012, which is every bit as pertinent now. But this is like young internet. This is nothing. This is like probably floppy disk situation. Now it's everywhere. So the combination of food, like kind of the trauma that feeds poor impulse control, or the lack of, and that's like, physical. And then the ready ability of overconsumption of everything when you have nothing else and you're in your room. There's not just one person. And internet addiction is something that I really am talking a lot about in my next book, and the one after this, because I think it's something that it's not talked about yet, and it needs to be dealt with. And it's going to be something where parents and families of means are going to be able to like have their kids go to that. And it's going to take a long time to get like social services to be able to pay for it. But I think it's something that we have to look at. This is just moving around and where people move between within the house and down the end of the block. Chantel, buying things on time. It used to be like phone orders or this kind of like, they just talk about, again, in the 20s, you could buy a house, but then you couldn't, like, you'd buy a house cash. Like, people didn't mortgage their homes the way we do today, but then you couldn't put stuff in it. So that's when this kind of buying on the installment plan came. And then I sort of brought it up to this whole like crazy rent to own thing. And then I have many more than I'll ever use of how much something really cost. And then people are paying like 20 times as much for it. Epilogue Then and Now, there's that place, which is now actually those apartments. And then the alternative high school where everybody went, which is basically like if you're kicked out of every other school, has become the school loft. And I went in one person's apartment and I saw that in her, like it was in the windowsill that are metal in her apartment. It's like, some things you just can't erase, can you? It's interesting. And then these are all the things in downtown Troy. So I need one, and then that's that young man who is in prison. I just want to go to one thing. I want to go to the end of the second book because I don't want to leave you guys like this. Is that, I don't even know why that's in there. Oh, that is the young woman who was up for adoption. That's her with her adopted mother and her birth mother and her siblings. Isn't that beautiful? I mean, like it's the healing. It's not even in the ways that like policy sort of lays out, because to me, any policy or most of them leave out the human emotions, because the way we experience life is through our emotions. And so a lot of poverty goes hand in hand with emotional stuff. And not that we don't need the money, we do, but we need other wealth too and other possibilities. And there's this whole court case, but I just want to get to the end. Sorry, guys. Oh God, I did a lot more than I thought. Yeah. So if you go through this, you'll see, I just have to show you this. This is like right out of my childhood. I swear, I look at this and I'm like, this could have been my brother. Like, where is he? Like he's showing like his whole penis size. In case you have any doubts. Yeah, he's amazing. In prison. Sorry, Robert. Fingers cut off. This is also amazing. His father just died, but I photographed him on his 20th birthday. And then last year, I'm looking at his father. His mother and father are divorced, but he still comes around because everybody's family. I'm like, that's the shirt. It's the same damn shirt. So I bought that shirt from him for $20. So I now own it. I had to have that shirt. Going to the end. Sorry. Well, okay, hold on. Well, I don't want to go to the end here. All right. So I, at the end, thought that I wanted to, because I love this movie, American Honey by Andrea Arnold. Anybody seen that movie? See that movie if you haven't seen it, where they're all riding around America, these kind of like ragtag group of misfit kids, and they're selling magazine subscriptions. And it really reminded me when I was in the group home, and I've watched it so many times. They're singing all these different songs and they're in the back of this van. And I just love to vibe out on that movie because it's like going back there. I'm going to rifle through these very quickly, but I promise you it's worth it. So I said, well, I want to do this trip when we celebrate the second book. And then it was after the pandemic and I was 62. And I was like, I might not have the strength to do it. And so I was getting a lot of jobs. I worked every day of the pandemic. I was getting a lot of jobs. And so I said, no, we have to do it now. And it has to be part of the book. So in 2021, we did that. Something I didn't realize is that 3 of the kids, we took 5, all of their fathers are incarcerated at the same place in Clinton. And I didn't even realize it until after Little Siberia. And then I got all there. You can go online and see where people are. And I thought, they're not going to have the chance that these kids are going to have. And it was life-changing, and we want to do it again, but we're poor. Anyway, this is Upstate Girls. That's Tony. That's the two kids, one step, one full of the young man that's doing life. And this is an amazing kid who Deb Stockless took in because he lived down the street and his older brother has a baby with one of her daughters. And so they're like family, and they live in they have two little apartments that they made upstairs, and family all live there. And then they pay not as much as they would market, but it helps everybody. Anyway, his father killed his mother in front of him a few days before Thanksgiving. And I think that was 2014. And this kid is like the most loving, amazing person. So they've never been on a plane before. They've never been, and actually he did go when his mother died because she was buried in Puerto Rico. And so they trusted me. We had to get the IDs. We had to do all that stuff. And so that's the Grand Canyon. And then this is some of the stuff. I bought this bus, but it didn't work. That's a whole other story. So I flew everybody out there because I'm like, nobody's going to tough it out like in the car all the way out there and back. Let's fly out to like Albuquerque, where I found the bus while I was on assignment. It was a good bus, but not for me. Someone has it now at Burning Man, I think. So anyway, I bought the bus, hired a driver through Indeed. And so we just get the bus, not even really checking it out. And we start out and it has a lot of problems. So we didn't spend a lot of time in the bus. We got some great pictures. And then we couldn't get any parts for it either because it was that summer 2021 when you couldn't get parts. This is Death Valley. That's like Dante's. See, I told you it's worth it. So worth it, earn it. If I had a penny for everything in one of those carts I've purchased over my lifetime, I'm a vegan. I don't eat bread. It's like I always say I'm constantly buying food I don't eat, like all these things that I don't. But that's Ellie. She's amazing, amazing. That was the one good day we had on the bus, and then the next day that's Las Cruces, New Mexico. The next day they had to take it away. So we were just under that tree. It was sad. That's near the Clown Motel in Tonopah, Nevada, where there's supposed to be this haunted graveyard. That's by the Pacific Ocean going towards San Diego. That's Angel. That's Artist Palette in Death Valley. So these are places that I had gone that I always wanted to go when my son graduated high school. College, he was out there. So I went, so I knew them, but then I wound up getting a trailer out there, and that's them down there by the Pacific Ocean. That's Death Valley again. So I wanted places where the way I feel about it is that there are places where humans don't get to decide. We don't get to divvy it up. And so if society is man-made and if these things are constructs, then so is freedom. That's the way I feel about it. And that's like the Rio Grande, and my friend went and she videoed, and Tony went in there, and it was that's him. I was right there. It was amazing. Angel going fast. The donkeys, that's Beatty, Nevada. Love the donkeys in Beatty, Nevada. They're like stray dogs. Route 66. That's by my place in Bombay Beach. That's Tony. That's Ellie. That thing is there. They do all this art out there. And this thing, I call it art by God, and not that creepy one where they sell the zebra heads. There used to be a star. But you go there and you can actually see time. That's a crane, and it's just been there. And you see the way it's coagulated there. Ellie's amazing. Angel in New Mexico by the Rio Grande, the Clown Motel. If you haven't been there, I highly recommend that the Clown Motel. We're almost there. That's that cemetery. Honestly, there's the alien cat house, which is on the way out. I went and knocked on the door. None of my gentlemen friends were 18 yet, but I think that's something we need to figure out how to tactfully write a grant for. And that's White Sands, at dusk. White Sands, my friend's trailer, and that. Okay, that's it. If any. tried to keep it short. I don't know what we do. I think if anybody wants to, I won't feel offended if there's not, but it went long. Okay.
Just a question. At the beginning, you mentioned something about Baby Ann Kenneally.
Oh, baby girl Kenneally.
Baby girl Kenneally.
Yeah, coming not so soon to a bookstore near you.
Oh, okay.
That's me, because that's the name that was on my birth certificate. So I did this whole kind of riff on it. So I told my therapist that, and then she shared with me she's raising her granddaughter and also a baby girl. There's a lot of us out there. Oh, hi.
Hey, you're a storyteller, and what came first in your life, the words or the pictures, and how did you get to using a camera?
Well, I mean, Fast Eddie, I can't do him justice. That's just one part, but we're Irish. We can't help ourselves. But then I found photography because after I got sober, I had this bad job, and I never had any good job before that, so I just had a job. And I looked at this picture of a debutante, Brenda Fraser, that was photographed by Diane Arbus. And at one time, Brenda Fraser had been like the face of Life magazine. And then after what? I was named it. So was I, and I didn't even know it. We gotta talk. No, I didn't know it. That's a weird thing. So I see this picture, but it was written about a person named Diane Arbus who took this picture, and the picture I see of Brenda Fraser, she was like aged, probably was not as old as she looked, and she had taken to her bed for 40 years and was recluse. And I love that picture. I knew nothing about freak photography. I knew nothing about nothing, no art, nothing. My AA sponsor brought me to like the Norton Museum in West Palm Beach. That was my exposure to art. But I was drawn to that intense, painful picture, and then read about Diane Arbus. I'm like, God, this is a thing that you could do. And I got a camera, had this necklace that somebody gave me, and I sold it, and I got a Nickermac camera and hit the streets of Miami. That's how it happened. And later would learn that baby girl. I'm like, how did you ever find that out? And my mother was like, well, you hadn't been named for a long time, and people were like kind of mentioning it. And so I was at the pediatrician's, and I saw this picture of a fancy lady on his thing. Now, how do I prove that it was her? I don't, but it's a hell of a story. That then I would find that later, and because who would you be named after? Brenda Starr? I don't think so.
Yeah, well, she was a very famous debutante in the I was born in 1941, so in the late 30s, early 40s.
Most photographed one.
And had a radio program. It was Brenda and Kobina.
Oh, see, now I could do a whole other body. We should get together. So that's what happened. But I always did want to be a writer. Like, I don't even want to be. It's over now. But I feel like I would like to write like a lot more. It's good to get it out,
So I don't know how to articulate this question, and it might be really politically terrible. So I'm just going to put it out
Talking
there.
to the right person.
As I said, I brought a lot of people to see this exhibit because I thought it was really important. And one of the things that they said many people talked about was this sort of repetition of young women having children. And so I wondered, what do you think family means? What is it that we're missing? So I think sometimes people that don't grow up in communities like this don't understand what family means. And it sounds like you grew up there. So is there anything that you can say about like this generational love between these families with all of these really young children and a lot of people living together? You would think maybe they would go, but that's not what happens, right? We just build more and more family. So what does that bring up for you if I say that, or what does it feel like?
Well, people ask that a lot, and they used to ask that to my friend Adrienne too. So thank God she published her book first. I was actually part of a show God, I wish I could remember this fabulous woman. It was at the Open Society Institute and it traveled. The name of the show was Motherhood is Not a Class Privilege. But I just say to that, children are the hope of the future. So who doesn't want hope? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
that's it. Like, children are the hope of the future. And what I can't, you know what I mean?
Yeah, you know, that's great. I mean, it really.
I mean, so you could say that to them. Like, I get it.
And do you have an ongoing relationship with these kids?
Oh, yeah. I mean, okay, so back in the day, which is only the day before the bad thing happened when the guy went to prison, they would have come. But there's certain things here that they're actually still going through from the second book. And I did talk to one of the moms about it, and it's just not a good idea now. And it will be. They've written about it. They've written about sexual trauma. They've written about it, but it's not the same as standing in front of a bunch of people that you don't know. But yeah, of course. I mean, we want to, like, Yellowstone is the kind of next goal. However, when I finished that trip, I turned 63, and I realized that there was a life that I wanted to have that I couldn't articulate it then because I was young. I didn't even know what life there was, or you could say what you wanted, but I wanted to do something. And so I wanted to be an artist. I wanted to, like, get out of there and be part of the wider world. And I realized, like, that I had just gone back there. I mean, not that it's not great, it is, but, like, if these were my actual kids and I was their grandmother, I might be heading off in an Airstream. You know what I mean? So, like, that's the template that I have for the way we change our relationship. I know what it's like with my kid. I text him and he doesn't call me back. Like, sorry, he might be listening. But you know, like, so these kids that I've been a part of that I kind of raised and they raised me, it's like they owe me nothing. And it was very sad. It was like, it took me a year of just, like, walking every day to place it. So now my relationship is, I'm finishing their book. I'm writing a book about myself, but it's really about my mother as a single mother too. And so I don't see them as much because I could go right back and start doing this right now all over again. And I can't, because I have to grow just like I want them to grow, just like I want my own kid to grow. I mean, that's what it is that after a while, I wasn't growing. I mean, I was, but then if I went back after we did the trip and I started doing it again, I'm not growing as an artist or a person, and I'm still, you know, a rebellious teen. That's it.
I have a comment and a question, and like you said, trying to phrase it. First of all, thank you for, I think probably from everybody, for opening a lot of people's eyes to a whole other world and a whole other culture. It's just in our own country, that's a totally different world. I work with visiting nurses for 35 years, and I go into different homes and different cultures and different, financial, very affluent, very poor, very whatever, and so many different kinds of homes and different people. And most people don't get a chance to see another world and feel. And I think it's so important that we care and we feel and we understand that it's just a whole different world. It could be just down the street and just another part of Kingston and another part of everywhere. And that's so important. So thank you for that. Hopefully it can change the world. What is coming out of some of these families and all these children now that are grown up? Like, where are they going? Are they breaking the pattern? Are they on the way where they mentored? I mean, they see you as a role model, and they must see other things as role models. Is anybody, going for more education? Are they able to break out of the whole cycle?
Well, yeah, okay. So and I know it's getting, like, really late,
now
but
you've shown them this, and now they've had a chance, and now it sounds like, okay, now
right, okay,
we
but
can adopt everybody and bring everyone home.
I tried. I tried, and I wrestle with that. But So one trip to the desert doesn't change like things all the way back from the potato famine, let's say. So that's one thing that I think that we like, the changes are gradual and they happen over time, and they might not be like what they think. There have been one person in particular really making some great strides in education, and then had a real kind of emotional, I don't even want to say relapse, but stumbling, because still processing a lot of trauma. So that's kind of put on hold. And it was a school, a very important school that they got into free. And then had gone to another school. Like, so there's stuff, but it's more like what you getting to feel comfortable and entitled in different things, and that the possibilities are for you. And also the language, like I sit around sometimes and listen to people, especially writers, so much I don't know. And I've seen a lot and I can make myself feel comfortable, but I often think like, wow, I imagine how this or that person feels. So people eat a little differently. They would definitely go on another trip, and that's huge. Wanted to actually do a few more things with me this summer. Did spend a lot of time here in Kingston. So yeah, these kids, but this is like one person deeply involved with like one extended family, and only because of that. So in terms of like a replicable, what do they call it in nonprofit? Deliverable. Like if we do this, this is going to happen. I think that's different. I'm going to sum it up like this. I'm kind of writing this movie, and the end of it is after the one girl has gone to the fancy school and she comes back and she winds up going back to school with her friends. Her mom has started to eat really healthy. And so you saw the blue cake there. And so one time I was photographing, and it was before we went on the trip, and the young girl who's the one holding the baby, that's her sister, not her baby. I mean, that could be her baby. So there's a change, right? She picks out the blue cake, and the mom, somebody who's the daughter of my spirit, after texts me the next day and feels really bad about it. She's like, I know you guys videoed that cake because we were getting ready to go on the trip, and you have photographs, and I've tried to change so hard and I can't, and the cake and everything. And she was like, we had this whole thing about the cake, what she feels about the cake, because she's seen the cake in the pictures. So the end of this movie that I write is where Ellie, that girl, is at a party, and all the old friends are back. None of the people from the new fancy school. It's all the old friends, all the old support system. And there are 2 cakes at the party. And all the old friends say, oh, that cake's nasty. And they, all the stuff kids, that's nasty. It's terrible. And so Ellie, who's amazing, grabs 2 plates, each one with cake, fills her mouth, and talks very loud and disgusting. I like them both. And to me, that's like a huge change. And that really sums up like what we have to, how much love it takes to heal, and to none of us, have all these things of separation kind of dissolve. I don't know if I think it'd be the good end of a movie, but that really, I think, is pretty much what you got. There you go.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Hi, this one last one. I just wanted to point out the fact that when you brought up the part about like the jail town, we're in one also. So that was a good sort of contrast. And it's a good contrast too between like industry like IBM moving town and the prison industrial complex, becoming bigger and like upgraded the jail. So that was interesting. Because I think that jail towns is not something spoken about much. Because even like the New York City population gets shipped up here too. So I think that's something great to bring to the world's attention. And it affects a lot of people here in Kingston as well, just like these folks. And I also think it's amazing that you're bringing light to everyday, working folks. So I think that's awesome. And about the lady that asked what it might be like growing up in a family like this, I would say I kind of grew up in a family like that a little bit. Not like certain nuances, but as far as like, my mom had me at 14, and then it was just like us, my grandmother, and different generations living in the house. And that's how most people live in Jamaica anyway. So when you're in a situation like that, no matter the socioeconomic stance, like they're just like your family. They're literally just like anybody else. So, but mainly what being in a situation like that teach you is that love, as you say, it might sound corny, but like that's really what matters. So it's fine. And even when you said about housing people, and then like if humanity, Habitat for Humanity was to help that one person, I'm experiencing that as a landlord myself. Housing a community, and your property falling apart, and not getting any help. So that's difficult from a personal standpoint. So I love that you brought light to that.
It's an idea. And you might have someone here who works in housing to say.
I'm sorry, we're gonna go, we're gonna be so obvious about it, we're just.
That's okay. I think it's good.
Thanks.
Next week, our meeting is on Wednesday versus our usual Thursday. It will be our artist residents, Kara Mine and Sean Henry Smith. So please come out, but on Wednesday, not Thursday. Thank you.